After hitting the reset button on life to stop my childhood friend from going full-blown yandere again, I babied her and held her in the palm of my hand like my own flesh and blood sister. By day, I lectured her on the core values of a civilized society. By night, I educated her on the cautionary legal tales of the infamous outlaw, John Doe. Just when I was feeling incredibly smug that my childhood friend wouldn't turn into a psycho-obsessive yandere this time around, I rummaged through her room and unearthed an aquarium diary, a densely packed stalker log. It was densely filled with every single excruciating detail about me. The date of our first meeting, the date we first held hands, even the exact date of my first AM nocturnal awakening. Just as I was reading this and sweating buckets, my childhood friend stealthily hugged my neck from behind. "Brother, your clothes smell like men's cologne today." Cut to me, at the tender age of 8, sitting on the sofa in my own house, sighing like a retired old man. From outside the door across the hall came the pitiful, kitten-like crying of a child. The girl across the hall, Lyra, was being beaten for the 5th time in just 2 days. Yes, you guessed it. I had been reborn, and reborn right back to being an 8-year-old. At this moment, I glanced at the door opposite ours. Looking dead serious at my mom, Evelyn, who had just walked out of the kitchen, I said, "Mom, how about we pack up and move? I feel like our house's aura is a bit cursed." Before my words could even land, my mom reached out and smacked the back of my head. "You little brat, knock it off. The only thing in your eyes is that cartoon sheep on TV. What do you mean, cursed aura? All day long, just nonsense. Have you finished your summer homework yet?" Saying that, she couldn't help but glance at the front door. Lowering her voice, she muttered, "It's a sin, truly. Beating such a cute little girl every single day," I grumbled internally. "Sin? Forget about the sin. And cute little girl? When this girl grows up, she's going to literally claim your son's life." Lyra's family situations was an absolute train wreck. A dad who drank like a fish, a mom who ran for the hills, and the daughter who was left behind. Ever since I had memories, the little sister across the hall was always crying. Her clothes were always covered in dirt. Because of this, she was frequently ostracized and isolated at school. The other kids mocked her, saying her mommy didn't want her anymore, that she was an unwanted stray. At that time, although I was Lyra's neighbor, I had never bullied her. But at school, I definitely never took the initiative to approach her either. Thinking of this, I couldn't help but let out a heavy sigh. Given all that, how on earth did Lyra end up falling for me later in life? And even went as far as kidnapping me? While I was still deep in my philosophical thoughts, my mom yelled at me to go buy soy sauce. I took the opportunity to use my pocket money to secretly buy a fluffy cotton candy. Just as I reached the bottom of the stairs and was about to take a giant bite out of my sugary cloud, I saw Lyra. The beautiful little girl's face was covered in purple and blue bruises. Her eyes were swollen shut. The corner of her mouth was cracked and bleeding. Even though she was wearing long sleeves in the dead of summer, you could still see the skin peeking out was riddled with scars. The moment I saw her, my body instinctively went into a primal state of panic. My back instantly broke out in a cold sweat. After all, in my past life, I was drugged by her, went through a crazy day and night, and then kicked the bucket right there on the bed. Who wouldn't be terrified of that? As if sensing my petrified gaze, she suddenly looked over with a blank, expressionless face. Meeting those eyes that were brimming with coldness and hatred, the sheer terror of being pinned down by her in my past life was bubbling up, impossible to suppress. So, with my brain completely short-circuiting, I slowly extended my hand. Do you want a bite?" A gigantic, pink cloud of cotton candy was offered right in front of the little girl. She froze. The coldness and hatred solidified in those beautiful eyes. Eventually, it melted into bewilderment and a touch of helpless confusion. Finally, I saw a bizarrely sweet smile bloom on the girl's face. She reached out with her scar-covered hand. Trembling slightly, she took the cotton candy from my grasp. "Thank you, brother." Originally, seeing her eagerly take a bite, I let out a massive sigh of relief. I quickly sidestepped her, wanting to sprint upstairs as fast as my little legs could carry me. But soon, I heard a very light set of footsteps trailing right behind me. I turned my head and immediately locked eyes with those bright, massive doe eyes. Seeing me stop, Lyra offered the cotton candy back to me. In a tiny voice, she said, "Brother, do you still want to eat? I only ate a little bit. You can eat from this side, it's not dirty." The way she spoke, so softly and full of expectation, looked incredibly pitiful and endearing. I stared blankly at the soft, adorable girl in front of me. I genuinely couldn't wrap my head around how she would eventually grow up into such an unhinged psycho. Just as I opened my mouth to refuse, footsteps echoed from upstairs. My mom, noticing I hadn't returned for a long time, was just coming out to look for her son. She immediately saw Lyra reaching out to hand me the cotton candy. With one glance, she spotted the horrific bruises on Lyra's body. A look of unbearable pity flashed across her face. She reached out and gave my head a good smack. "Are you asking for a death wish? Stealing the little sister's cotton candy?" Seeing an adult, Lyra's instinct was to shrink back. Seeing this unfold, I quickly yelled, "Hey, the stairs are right behind you." But it was too late. Lyra had already tumbled backward, rolling right down the staircase. My mom let out a small shriek. She rushed down to help her up. "Lyra, are you okay?" Thankfully, the stairs weren't too high. but for such a tiny kid to take a tumble like that, it definitely had to hurt. Yet, Lyra didn't utter a single whimper. Instead, after being pulled up, she just stared at the ruined cotton candy on the dirty floor. Tears welled up in her eyes, threatening to spill over. This pitiful sight absolutely shattered my mom's heart. She quickly scooped the tiny girl into her arms. "Auntie will take you to see a doctor, okay?" Lyra shivered violently, as if terrified to her core. "No, I don't have money. They'll call my dad. If dad sees, he'll beat me." My mom fell silent for a moment. Then she said with utmost gentleness, "It's okay. Auntie has a doctor right at home." To be perfectly honest, in my previous life, living up to the ripe age of 26, I had never, ever seen my mother this gentle. Then, peering over my mom's shoulder, I saw Lyra staring directly at me. I pulled a goofy face at her. "Stop looking at me. Your stare is giving me the creeps." After going inside, I immediately pointed at Lyra, who was now sitting on our sofa, and defended my honor. "I bought that cotton candy for her. I didn't even get to take one single bite." Hearing this, Lyra instantly stood up. Her small body trembling, she whispered an apology. I'm sorry. I won't ever dare to eat it again." My mom quickly cooed in her softest voice. "Lyra, don't be scared. Auntie isn't scolding anyone, okay? If brother gave it to you, then you eat it. It's perfectly fine." At this moment, my feelings were an absolute tangled mess. Didn't I promise myself I'd stay far away from her? How did I end up bringing this little future psycho right into my living room? I watched my mom, her face full of heartache, applying medicine to Lyra's wounds. Suddenly, I remembered that in my past life, my mom had actually tested the waters and asked me, "How about mom brings the little sister from across the hall over to play with you?" But back then, I had replied with pure disgust. "I don't want to play with her. Nobody at school likes playing with her. If I hang out with her, my classmates won't talk to me anymore." Now, thinking back to my childhood self, and looking at Lyra, covered in bruises, trembling as the medicine was applied yet not making a single sound of pain, I realized that past me really was kind of a jerk, huh? Originally, I had always thought there was no bad blood between me and Lyra. But thinking about it now, the cold bystander who shattered her last sliver of hope was probably me. No wonder when I was tied up to that bed, I heard her standing beside me, whispering with genuine confusion, "Why couldn't I be your sister? I envied you so much. How about I be your wife instead? Then we'll finally be a family." Thinking of this, I let out a heavy sigh. I turned around, dug out all my top-secret hidden snacks and brought them over. Tearing open the packaging, I handed them to Lyra. "Eat some of this first. My mom will have dinner ready soon. Her cooking is top tier." But Lyra didn't dare to take them. By pure reflex, she darted a cautious look at my mom. That hyper-careful, frightened demeanor would make anyone's heart ache. My mom shot me a glare. She took the snacks from my hands and gently placed them into Lyra's. "There we go, you eat them, it's completely fine." Then she locked her sights on me. "Kaylin, come with me." I hung my head in defeat, trailing behind my mom like a dead man walking. I felt a spanking coming on. "Please, let it not be the buttocks this time. I'm 26 years old mentally, for heaven's sake." Surprisingly, Mom just pulled me into the bedroom. In a hushed voice, she asked, "Does Kaylin like the little sister?" I blanked out for a second. I remembered how the past me had rejected her without a second thought. If, in this life, I don't reject her, maybe she won't turn into a total psycho later on. If she doesn't turn psycho, I won't have to die prematurely. Plus, being a 26-year-old adult on the inside, watching a little girl get beaten senseless every day didn't sit right with my conscience. So I silently nodded my head. Mom breathed a sigh of relief. She probably didn't expect me to be this mature and understanding. As a reward, Mom blessed me with $10. Then she went out to take Lyra home to grab some clothes. But Lyra thought she was being kicked out. Her face turned pale. The look she gave me, as I stood in the bedroom doorway, was incredibly complex. Seeing her keep staring at me, my mom assumed Lyra was just attached to me. She simply reached out and dragged me along. "Lyra, don't be scared. Brother and Auntie will go with you to get your clothes. Your dad just left, so he probably won't be back anytime soon. How about you eat and sleep at Auntie's house tonight?" Hearing this, Lyra's eyes lit up like fireworks. She reached out her tiny hand and carefully tugged at the hem of my shirt. In a soft yet intensely serious voice, she said, "Brother, my hands aren't dirty." I looked down at her, sighed, "Let's go." The moment we opened their front door, a foul stench assaulted our noses. In the living room, the sofa was lopsided, the table was smashed, the TV on the stand was covered in cracks, and there were literal bloodstains on the floor. I instantly thought of the bruises on Lyra's face. At this moment, the tiny hand clutching my shirt gripped it a little tighter. I thought she was terrified. I turned my head, ready to offer some comforting words. But instead, I caught sight of her cold, emotionless expression. Her gaze fell upon the bloodstains, seemingly carrying a hint of mockery. That expression was so wildly out of place for someone her tender age. It sent a violent chill straight through my heart. Holy macaroni, is she already in her yandere phase? If so, didn't I just invite a wolf into the house? What if she harms my parents? Then I watched as my mom held Lyra's hand, leading her to the balcony to pack. She didn't even have a bedroom. Whenever her dad was home, she was forced to sleep on the balcony. And honestly, calling it packing was a stretch. There was basically nothing to pack. Her clothes hadn't fit her in ages. They were all outfits her mom bought for her when she was 5. After her mom bailed, No one ever bought her anything again. Mom was practically dying of heartbreak. Before, she thought Lyra always wore long sleeves just to hide her scars. The truth was, she couldn't fit into her short sleeves anymore. Mom looked at Lyra with pure sorrow. Auntie will buy you new ones. You stay at Auntie's house for a while. Wait until your dad comes back. Saying this, Mom paused. Lyra, ever the perceptive one, said sensibly, I'll come back then. Auntie Evelyn, I won't let him find out. My dad, Arthur, is a doctor. After coming home from his shift, he treated Lyra's wounds. The poor kid's back was practically beaten to a pulp. Thank God there was no major damage to her bones. While being treated, Lyra even had the nerve to comfort my mom. Auntie Evelyn, I know I have to curl up into a ball. That way he won't hit my head or my bones. Hearing this coming out of an 8-year-old's mouth, even though I was slightly terrified of her, I couldn't help but feel a massive pang of pity, let alone my mom, whose heart was already bleeding for her. That night at dinner, all my chicken drumsticks magically migrated to Lyra's bowl. But Lyra, being the sensible angel she was acting as, transferred a drumstick right back to my bowl. Brother, you eat. My feelings were an absolute tangled web, sympathy mixed with straight-up fear. But all those complex emotions shattered into a million pieces when my mom announced that Lyra would be sleeping with me. I stared at Lyra, who was standing right next to my mom. Mom, men and women shouldn't share a bed after the age of 7. We're already 8. This is highly inappropriate. It's just for one night. We don't have a spare room. Tomorrow your dad and I will go buy a bunk bed. Just let the little sister have some space. My mom clearly knew her demand was a bit unreasonable. I glared with eyes wide open and decisively declared, Then I'm sleeping with Dad. You two can sleep together. But the moment the words left my mouth, panic set in. What if Lyra decides to hurt my mom in her sleep, even though she looks tiny and weak right now? No, absolutely not. I can't take that risk. Just as my mom was about to agree, I blurted out, Never mind, let her sleep with me. Lyra, get over here. Lyra obediently shuffled over. Looking up at me, she said, Brother, I don't move around when I sleep. I felt immensely annoyed. Sleep, sleep, sleep! Mom! You go back to bed too. Seeing my grumpy attitude, Mom looked a bit worried. She lectured us to get along and not fight, then finally left the room. In the end, Lyra and I lay on opposite edges of the bed. The no man's land between us was wider than the Grand Canyon. I had fully planned to pull an all-nighter. I was terrified that if I fell asleep, I'd get assassinated in my dreams. The person next to me carefully tried to roll over. I immediately rolled the opposite way, tumbling straight onto the floor with a thud. Lyra was stunned for a second. With a hint of panic, she asked, Brother, are you okay? I glared at her like a hawk. What were you trying to do just now? My back is hurting and itchy. I just wanted to turn over. I won't move anymore. She looked at me, biting her lip, and nervously glanced at the bedroom door. Lowering her voice, she offered, I can sleep on the floor. When I was at home, I slept on the balcony floor anyway. Brother, let me sleep on the floor. I stared at the little girl in front of me. Lyra was undeniably pretty. Looking back, a part of the reason she was bullied was probably because she was almost too pretty. Even with her face currently painted with bruises, she was still beautiful. Inevitably, my mind drifted to her back, and the scars littering her body, all whipped into her by her dad using a leather belt. Old scars layered over new ones. Some of the newer wounds, probably due to the scorching weather and lack of treatment, were starting to fester. I kept trying to brainwash myself that she and the psycho Lyra from my past life were two entirely different people, but in the end I couldn't even convince myself. I let out a heavy sigh. In a defeated, muffled voice I said, You sleep there. I'll sleep on the floor, otherwise my mom will whip me tomorrow. But Lyra vigorously shook her head. No, you can't. If Auntie sees, she'll think I'm a bad person. The moment I thought about how she had been walking on eggshells ever since she stepped into our house, I ultimately sighed again. I climbed back onto the bed, patted the empty space next to me. We sleep together. If you don't want to sleep with me. She was staring at me with those massive doe eyes. Before I could finish my sentence, I cut myself off. Hurry up and get in. I'm sleepy. Finally, the little girl carefully climbed under the covers. She curled up into a tiny ball in a minuscule corner of the bed. I decided to just ignore her existence. Flipped over, presenting my back to her. Originally, I swore I wouldn't be able to sleep a wink. But within 10 minutes, my body had sprawled out into a giant starfish shape, snoring away in dreamland. On the flip side, Lyra's eyes remained wide open. She didn't dare to move a muscle. It wasn't until she heard the steady, rhythmic sound of my breathing that she cautiously, oh so carefully, shifted her body and slowly inched closer to me. The emotions swirling in her eyes were complicated. Looking at my fast-asleep face, she currently had zero expression.